Pay attention to the woman in the yellow sundress. Her name is Maya Hayes. She is 26, a talented marketing associate who moved to Austin, Texas just 3 months ago. Now pay attention to the man sitting across from her, his professional camera resting on the table. His name is Evan Grant. He's 33, a charismatic and well-known local photographer. Now look at this footage, timestamped 2 days prior. It's from a Tractor Supply Company store in the suburb of Round Rock, 20 miles north of Austin. The same man, Evan Grant, is seen walking calmly to the checkout. His shopping cart contains a heavy-duty pointed shovel, a coiled 100-foot length of thick nylon rope, and 2 50-pound bags of agricultural lime. Finally, watch this clip from a public parking garage dated May 10th. Maya Hayes, holding her coffee, walks toward Evan's dark gray Subaru Outback. He smiles, takes her bag, and places it in the trunk before holding the passenger door open for her. This was not a photography shoot. It was a meticulously planned execution. Evan Grant was not her friend. He was her predator. Within 2 hours of that footage, Maya Hayes' phone would send its final desperate signal to a cell tower, and she would never be seen alive again. On May 10, 2024, Maya Hayes was on the verge of what she believed was her big break. After saving for 2 years, she had finally left her hometown in Arizona to start fresh in Austin. She was smart, ambitious, and deeply creative, but also carried the quiet vulnerability of someone in a brand new city with no real support system. Her only anchor was her older sister, Jenna Scott, a teacher living in San Diego. They were more than sisters, they were best friends. Their lives were chronicled in a constant stream of texts and nightly check-in calls. Maya, while independent, shared everything with Jenna. She had shared her anxieties about finding a job, her loneliness, and eventually her excitement about meeting Evan Grant. She had met Evan 6 weeks earlier in early April. It seemed like pure chance. She had joined a popular local hiking group on social media to try and meet people. He was one of the group's most active members, his feed filled with stunning artistic photos of the Texas Hill Country. He was the first to comment on her post introducing herself, offering tips on easy, safe trails for beginners. An online conversation began, which quickly moved to text, and then to that first coffee meeting captured on camera. He was, as Maya later described him in a text to Jenna, charismatic and supportive. He learned of her ambition to do freelance modeling, and after reviewing her private Instagram portfolio, he was effusive with praise. He presented a win-win proposition. He needed a fresh face for a new portfolio submission to a major art gallery, and she would get a complete professional set of photos to kickstart her career, all for free. For Maya, struggling to make ends meet at her entry-level marketing job, it was a dream. Over the next few weeks, he became her mentor. He coached her on posing and lighting, sent her encouraging texts, and built a foundation of absolute, unwavering trust. He was, in her own words, the only person in the city who seemed to truly understand her creative goals. In early May, he announced he had found the perfect location. It was a secluded, secret overlook in the Balcones Canyonlands National Wildlife Refuge, a vast, remote area he claimed only a few locals knew about. The shoot was set for Friday, May 10th. He would pick her up at 11 a.m. That morning at 10:48 a.m., Maya sent her last text to Jenna. It was a selfie from her apartment, beaming with excitement. She wrote that it was showtime and that she was off to the big shoot with Evan at an insane location. She promised to call the second she was done. Jenna replied almost immediately with an encouraging message, telling her sister to break a leg and that she couldn't wait to hear all about it. The call never came. At 6 p.m., Jenna checked her phone. Nothing. A small cold knot began to form in her stomach. Maya always called. She was meticulous. Jenna's texts asking how the shoot went were delivered but remained unread. At 8 p.m., her calls began going straight to voicemail. This was wrong. This was not Maya. Frantically, Jenna searched her texts for the photographer's name, Evan Grant. She found his photography page on Instagram and sent him a message, identifying herself as Maya's sister and explaining that she hadn't heard from her and was getting very worried. His reply, which came 30 minutes later, was calm, breezy, and immediately terrifying. He claimed the shoot was amazing, that Maya was a total pro, and that he had dropped her back at her apartment around 5:30. He suggested she was probably just exhausted and that she would surely be in touch soon. Jenna's blood ran cold. If he had dropped her off hours ago, why wasn't she answering? She called the Austin Police Department's non-emergency line. The initial response was procedural and dismissive. An officer explained that Maya was a 26-year-old adult. Her friend had confirmed dropping her off. They could not file a missing persons report for an adult who had only been out of touch for a few hours. Jenna was hysterical. She insisted that Maya would never do this, that something was wrong. To placate her, the dispatcher agreed to send a patrol car to Maya's building for a welfare check. An hour later, an officer called Jenna back. There was no answer at the apartment and no signs of a break-in. They could not legally enter. They advised her to wait until morning. Jenna didn't wait. She booked the first flight from San Diego to Austin, which left at 5 a.m. The next morning, Jenna was at the Austin Police Headquarters demanding to speak to a detective. She was met by Detective Harding, a sharp, no-nonsense veteran of the homicide unit who was assigned to missing persons. Harding listened patiently as Jenna laid out the entire story, her hand shaking as she showed the detective the texts. Jenna was adamant that Evan Grant was lying and that her sister would have called. Detective Harding was inclined to agree. The story from the last person to see her was too neat, and the sister's certainty was compelling. This was not a typical runaway case. He immediately designated Maya as a high-risk missing person. Harding's first move was to bring Evan Grant in for an informal interview. Evan came in voluntarily, projecting the same charming, helpful persona. He sat in the interview room, leaning forward, the picture of concern. He retold his story with perfect consistency. The shoot, he claimed, was fantastic. They were out at the popular and very busy Hamilton Pool Preserve. He said they wrapped around 4:30, hit some traffic, and he dropped her right at her apartment door around 5:30. He appeared racked with guilt, as if he were the last person to see her. Detective Harding, maintaining a professional demeanor, noted that to verify this timeline, they would be pulling Maya's cell phone records. He then asked if Evan would be willing to sign a consent form for his own records, just to speed things up. Evan Grant smiled and agreed without hesitation. It was the single biggest mistake he would ever make. The emergency exigent circumstances request for both his and Maya's cell phone location data came back just as Evan was leaving the precinct. Detective Harding stared at the two maps on his screen and his face hardened. The data was an electronic screen. It showed Maya's phone and Evan's phone traveling together west from Austin at 11 a.m., just as he said. But they didn't stop at Hamilton Pool. They kept going. They passed Johnson City. They went deep into the remote Balcones Canyonlands, far from any tourist spots. At 2:08 p.m., the two phones pinged a remote cell tower near Marble Falls. At 2:14 p.m., Maya's phone sent its final frantic signal. It wasn't a call or a text. It was a series of rapid, desperate pings, as if the phone was searching for a signal that wasn't there. At 2:15 p.m., Maya's phone went dark, permanently. At 2:16 p.m., just 1 minute later, Evan Grant's phone was also powered off. This was not a loss of signal. It was a manual act. For 2 hours and 34 minutes, there was only silence. At 4:50 p.m., Evan Grant's phone powered back on, pinging the exact same remote tower. At 5:30 p.m., the time he claimed he was dropping Maya off in Austin, his phone was actually just passing back through Johnson City, 50 miles away. He arrived back in his own neighborhood at 6:45 p.m. Every single word he had said was a lie. He had been with her when she disappeared. He had been in that remote, isolated spot for over 2 hours after her phone went dark, and he had driven back to Austin alone. Harding ordered an immediate warrant for his car, his apartment, and his computer. He also dispatched a search and rescue team to that remote tower near Marble Falls. This was no longer a missing person case. It was a recovery operation. The raid on Evan's apartment was swift. He was stunned. The charm evaporated, replaced by a cold, flat stare. He immediately requested an attorney and refused to speak further, but his apartment and car were already talking. His Subaru Outback was spotless, almost too clean. It smelled faintly of bleach, but the forensics team wasn't looking for what they could see. A K-9 unit trained in cadaver detection gave a massive, frantic alert in the trunk. When the team pulled back the trunk liner, they found it. A small dark red stain that had soaked through to the spare tire. It was a positive match for Maya Hayes. In his apartment, they found his hiking boots from the day before. They were caked in dark, rich soil, but on the soles, forensics found microscopic traces of a fine white powder. It was agricultural lime. That's when Detective Harding got the call from the Round Rock Tractor Supply Company store. Security had found the receipt, shovel, rope, 2 50-pound bags of lime. The purchase was made 2 days before he ever offered to take Maya on the shoot. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a plan. Meanwhile, 80 miles away, the search team was combing the dense, unforgiving wilderness near the cell tower. They focused on logging roads and fire breaks. At 7 p.m., a deputy spotted something. Tire tracks matching a Subaru that veered off a disused service road and into a thicket of oak and juniper. He followed the tracks on foot for 50 yards until he saw it. A patch of earth roughly 6 feet by 3 feet that was freshly turned. The ground was covered in a bizarre, chalky white paste where the lime had mixed with the damp soil. It was a shallow grave. The recovery team worked for hours. Inside, they found Maya Hayes. She had been bound with the same nylon rope sold at the supply store. The news was relayed to Jenna, who collapsed. The search was over, but the case was not. The final, silent witness still had to speak. The report from the state medical examiner was brutal and definitive. It destroyed any possibility of an accident story. Maya had not fallen. She had been murdered. Her cause of death was ligature strangulation. The nylon rope had been used to kill her, but the report detailed a horrific, violent struggle. She had deep defensive wounds on her arms and hands. She had fought back, hard. The ME concluded that the struggle had been prolonged. He had overpowered her, and he had murdered her. The why, however, remained a mystery. Evan Grant, on advice from his lawyer, was completely silent. He was a stone wall. Harding knew the answer had to be on his computer. The forensics team unlocked his hard drive and they found the real Evan Grant. The man who presented himself as a semi-pro photographer was a total fraud. His hard drive was a graveyard of rejection letters from galleries, magazines, and art shows. He was a failure, consumed by bitterness, and he was an obsessive, methodical stalker. The true horror was in a hidden encrypted folder. The folder was labeled MH. Inside were 142 photographs of Maya Hayes, but they weren't from their shoot. They were photos of her at the grocery store, photos of her walking to her car from her marketing job, photos of her taken with a powerful telephoto lens through her own apartment window. He had been watching her for weeks, possibly since the day she moved to Austin. The chance meeting in the hiking group was no chance at all. He had engineered it. And then there was the browser history. It was not a chaotic list, it was a calculated plan. He hadn't just been looking at photo locations. The digital forensics team uncovered his research from the week before the murder. He had spent hours studying cell service dead zones in Balcones Canyonlands and how long for agricultural lime to decompose a body. He had also looked up easiest way to break into 2019 Toyota Corolla, Maya's car, likely to plant a tracker. He had even researched her sister Jenna, finding her social media, learning her schedule, and confirming she was safely hundreds of miles away in California. This wasn't a story of a crush that went wrong. It was a story of obsessive possession. He had stalked her, he had failed to win her, and so he had decided to keep her, the only way he knew how. The trial of Evan Grant in April 2025 was a formality. The evidence was a digital and physical avalanche, the cell phone data that destroyed his alibi, the store receipt for the tools of the murder, the lime on his boots, the soil in his trunk matching the grave, Maya's blood in his car, and the horrifying timeline from his own computer. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of kidnapping. At the sentencing, Jenna Scott was given the chance to address the court. She stood and faced the man who had sat across from her sister, smiling. She spoke directly to Grant, her voice shaking but clear, echoing through the silent courtroom. She described how he had exploited her sister's kindness, her trust, and her beautiful bright-eyed hope, using them as weapons against her. She explained that Maya had just wanted to make a friend and build a life. She held up the last photo Maya had ever sent her, the excited selfie, ensuring he and the court saw the vibrant life he had stolen. Evan Grant was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was transferred to the Texas State Penitentiary, where he remains today. The case became a chilling local story, a reminder that in a new city, the most dangerous predators are often the ones who offer a hand in friendship, and that in the modern world, your digital footprint will always tell the truth, even when you can't.